You might actually be the most derivative one of all. I mean, Christ, the same house.
Maybe so. But you forgot the first rule of surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking the ghosts are just a metaphor. We're talking moth motifs. And we're talking the horror was for love. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace. And we're talking I Heard You the First Time.
She certainly did.
I forgot that line existed in this movie. And me sitting on my couch watching it by myself just busted out laughing.
Oh, I can see you guffawing at that for sure. And then also like, I'm just going to bean you in the head with a shovel.
Oh, God. I think it's maybe possibly CGI or maybe it's a model. Nevertheless, it's funny looking.
It looks a little odd. I will say the dad's death looks way better. But you know what? That's splitting hairs.
Oh, my God. Everyone, we are discussing Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, a movie that I think I'm surprised, but a lot more people are excited by us covering than I was expecting.
Yeah, this was kind of like a backbench catalog where we thought one day we'll get to this. It'll be lots of fun. And then all of a sudden people were like, oh, we're so glad that you're doing this. Like, this is a favorite film. Very, very excited. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right back at you. And, this is a movie where I don't know, I hadn't seen this since it came out. I liked it when it came out, but I didn't really love it, and so I was not hesitant to rewatch it, but I was kind of like, how am I going to feel about this? But it was weird. About 20 minutes into the movie, I was like, I'm really enjoying this. So yeah, that's how my viewing went.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same thing. I saw this in theaters. I was a little underwhelmed. But I remember really liking the costumes and the set design. And then rewatching this, it was like, okay, well, what is the movie actually doing as opposed to what do you want it to do? And I still have some road bumps with the narrative, but overall, like, this is just so fucking gorgeous to look at. And these actors are really good. So it was just like, yeah, I'll settle in and watch, an hour and 50 minutes of these beautiful people fucking each other over.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get to it, but I definitely pulled a Joe the first time I saw this movie. So,
sure.
Before we get into that, why don't we bring in our guest that's waiting in the wings, because he is a Crimson Peak superfan.
There we go.
Everyone, he is a writer and columnist at such sites like Talk Film Society and Daily Grindhouse, writing book reviews for the latter. He is also the co-host of the upcoming Uwe Boll podcast, Lovin' Uwe, and you may also remember him from our previous episode on Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, or our mini-sode Saw Boner-sode that we did in advance of Spiral from the Book of Saw. Please welcome Greg Mucci.
Hey, what's up? I like how we started with the end of the movie. Just like the movie.
There we go.
God. I was going to ask Joe. I was like, what did you think about the end media? Honestly, this is bad.
Fine. It's fine. It's so unnecessary. But you know what? The reason that they do this is because they don't think the beginning of movies or stories are exciting enough. So I kind of get it. But this is just so slight. I'm like, boys, what are we doing? What are we doing with this?
Just start with the voiceover. You just need the voiceover. You don't need to see the end of the movie.
No, you're starting with a funeral. That's exciting enough. Come on.
Yeah, but I mean, you have Great Expectations and Wuthering Heights, both movies that I think Del Toro loves, that all start at the end. And even like Great Expectations starts with like a book opening up, which is similar to this in a way. So I don't know, I appreciate it because those were two movies that I went and watched before I wrote my piece for Rue Morgue on this, and I was just like, I had never seen the David Lean film, I never even read the book, but I was just like taken in by them. And yeah, I think they made me appreciate Del Toro's vision more. And yeah, it's just strange because he doesn't really note those as his influences. Same with like, Mario Bava is more like on his sleeve, but yeah, it's like the innocence, the haunting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would even like, because I think Joe Hill mentioned this in his review of the film, but he compared it to Daphne du Maurier's or Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca. And honestly, that I can't believe I never thought about that. And then when I read that, I was like, oh shit! Immediately, yes, this really rings true for me. And
I've never seen it.
Oh, you should watch Rebecca. The Hitchcock.
It is really good. Yeah. It pairs very well with this movie.
Okay.
But it's this book, oh my god, this movie, I was telling Joe earlier, it feels like a book adaptation.
Yes.
and watching it through that lens, I was like, oh, okay, I'm more on this movie's wavelength now than I was when I was, say, seeing the ghost and scare-filled trailer for it in front of every single movie that I saw in the theater for 3 months leading up to its release, and then getting a gothic romance instead.
Yes. Yeah. Because I feel like that's one of the big things. I went into this expecting gothic horror, and the movie is very firmly giving us gothic romance. And I do think that there's a very important qualifier between the two of them. Like, in my mind, this movie is not setting out to scare us. And I think if you go back and look at some of the middling reviews, they say, oh, well, this movie's not really scary. It's a little too obvious. And it's like, the movie never says that it's out to scare you. It has ghosts, but those are not the scary kind of ghosts.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's almost as if, like, she's writing the book in the movie, and everyone's just kind of like, oh, like, you should lean more in towards, like, the romance, because that sells, like, everyone feels love. And the people who did the trailer were like, yeah, well, like, people respond more to horror. At least, like,
yes,
within Del Toro's catalog.
It's so funny, right, though, because at the very beginning of this movie, when she's going to see Jonathan Hyde, king character actor of the 90s, he's like, oh, it's a ghost story. Well, no, it's a story that happens to have a ghost in it. And it's like, that's literally like lampshading this movie.
It's the movie telling on itself in the best way possible. It's just that nobody seemed to pick up on it the first time.
I was one of them. I was.
Yeah, me too.
And I think the reaction to this movie, and we'll talk about when we get to the reception, that was relatively muted. Like, I mean, I think people were excited, like, when it was in the build-up, but once it came out, it was kind of like, it didn't flop, but it was kind of like, brrr.
Yeah.
Well, where were both of you when this came out? Like, did you see it opening night?
I saw this at the secret screening world premiere at Fantastic Fest, where, so we don't know, I mean, we kind of knew it was going to be Crimson Peak, because those things are never really a full secret, but, like, we're all sitting there, a full sold-out theater, and Tim League walks out, and he's like, we're so excited to show you this film. It's from an up-and-coming Mexican filmmaker. I hope you like you blah, blah. And then just Guillermo del Toro just, like, walks out. And he introduces the film. So, I mean,
That's
it was a really good environment. This was my first year, my first festival ever. I had only been writing for Bloody for about 6 months at the time. This was my first festival, and the environment was all there for me. It's just, I mean, I had literally seen this trailer in front of every single movie. It was imprinted in my brain, and I had these expectations, which, as everyone knows, is not fair when you're walking into any kind of movie. And I just never took the chance to rewatch it. And so I'm actually really glad that I did this time, because I did like it quite a bit more.
Yeah, I saw it opening weekend, and it was primarily just because I was a fan of Guillermo's work on Pan's Labyrinth. So I had seen that when it had kind of initially come out, and I was like, oh, this guy's really one to watch. just like
one to watch.
Not his first film, you fucking dum-dum. But it was the one that broke big, right? It was the one where people said, oh, he's not just doing schlocky monster movies anymore. Yeah. Now he's doing like serious Oscar fare, and this could be contending at the, for a foreign film. And you're just like, oh my God, we hate genre so much when it comes to credibility. But all that to say, I was really looking forward to some of his subsequent sort of like more mature efforts. And this cast had me enthralled. And then, I went in with the wrong expectations. And I was like, oh, well, the CGI didn't really work all that well for me. And it was kind of obvious. And it's like, it's very much what you used to say about like 20-year-old you, Trace, where you're just like, I just wasn't in like the right headspace for a lot of these films.
But you know what? I'm surprised we haven't gotten this. I think if you slap a black and white filter on this movie and somehow make the CGI ghosts look not CGI, the vibe would be there for this movie for more people.
I think the vibe is there. I mean, I think that, 7-8 years later, because I saw this Thursday, I saw this opening weekend, well, like the Thursday, I saw it in IMAX, and I think people's, like, from my understanding and my love of like Pan's Labyrinth, I went early. I expected it to be a sold out show, and I think maybe 50 people like trickled in, and I was like, fuck, is this movie gonna bomb? Like, what's the deal? And I think when I first saw it, I was expecting what the trailer offered, which I think the trailer felt very much like the Del Toro produced movie, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark.
Yeah. I was thinking the exact same thing.
So it was Don't Be Afraid of the Dark was directed by Crimson Peak's co-writer Matthew Robbins.
Okay, I don't like that movie, but It's been a while.
Well, that's really funny because they also co-wrote Mimic together. And I know you don't like that movie.
Yeah, this past October was a bad rewatch.
Oh, no.
Because I saw that movie in theaters, and I think, like, it was, 97, 98?
97.
Yeah, 11, 12-year-old me was like, this movie fucking rules. It's got insects, has an insect wearing a trench coat, and, I don't know, like, little kids die. I thought the movie was kind of a bit brutal. And when I rewatched it, I mean, I hated the main actor, whose name I can't recall.
It's Mira Sorvino, right?
No, he means the guy, though. There's a guy in it.
She's fine, yeah. The guy is just like total like British milquetoast, if I can remember.
It's fine.
So like a crumpet, I guess.
We'll cover it one day.
Yeah. I don't know. You should do all, 3 of them?
3, yeah.
I've definitely seen the third one, which is like a Rear Window. It's like Mimic via Rear Window.
Oh my, those words do not go together.
I know. It's like I think of this guy witnesses the cockroach in the apartment building across the street, like killing somebody. Like it's very much that, but it's actually not as bad as you would think. A straight to video Mimic sequel. It's not great, but like it's fine.
Right.
I mean, I gave it 1 star. So.
Oh my god, Greg, you're killing me. Back to Crimson Peak. So okay. So Guillermo del Toro and Matthew Robbins, they wrote this spec script after the release of Pan's Labyrinth in 2006. And of course, this movie comes out in 2015. So there's a lot of stuff going on between there. And I was looking at this because del Toro kind of, like, he did Pan's Labyrinth, and then he did Hellboy 2, The Golden Army in 2008. And then he was, like, not directing movies for 5 years. I was like, what the fuck was he doing? He was writing and producing those Hobbit movies. And I was like, oh.
Mm-hmm. I think he was also trying to get In the Mouth of Madness or In the Mountains of Madness off the ground, and of course nobody ever wants to make that movie, so
yeah, well that's the thing. So he did Hellboy, goes on the hiatus for the Hobbits. He does Pacific Rim in 2013 and comes back with this, but he's submitted the script. He sold it quietly to Donna Langley at Universal Studios, and he planned to direct the film. But yeah, he went on this hiatus for all this shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then originally he was going to find another director to just do this film for him, but he couldn't find someone that he deemed suitable enough. So he had a good working relationship with Legendary Entertainment's Thomas Tull and John Jashny, who had asked what he wanted to do next. So he was like, instead of just saying, hey, I want to do Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, he sent them his screenplays for that, for a Western adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo, and for Crimson Peak. And they were like, well, the last of these, Crimson Peak, the original story, that's the best project for us. It's just the right size, which I actually find pretty fascinating that they went for an original property over an IP.
I wonder if it's because they looked at what the budget implications would be for the first one, and they were like, no. And then they looked at the possible box office of the second one, which is a Western, and they're like, no. So we'll go with the third one.
Interesting. When I hear, I was thinking like Western as in it takes place in the States as opposed to like Western European.
Oh, no.
But oh god. Also, I like the Jim Caviezel one. That one's good.
It's good. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah.
Universal allowed del Toro to move the project to Legendary with the caveat that they would put up money for a stake in the film. And so when pitching it, and I guess not pitching it, but just describing it, del Toro called the film a ghost story and a gothic romance. Very set-oriented, classical, but at the same time, modern take on the ghost story. He said it would allow him to play within the genre's conventions while subverting other rules. And that's kind of the part where I'm really interested to talk about, because I do think it's very classical. I do think it plays within the rules. I don't see a ton of subversion here, which isn't a problem. I just don't see it. He stated, I think that people are getting used to horror subjects done as found footage or B-value budgets, so he wanted this film to feel like a throwback.
Right.
He also wanted to honor the grand dames of the haunted house genre, so like Robert Weiss's The Haunting and Jack Clayton's The Innocents, as Greg already mentioned. He wanted to make a large-scale horror film in the tradition of those he grew up watching, like The Omen, like The Exorcist, and The Shining. And The Shining was the big one for him, because he was like, that's the Mount Everest of haunted house movies, and like the high production values, incredible effects, and the Kubrick's control over these enormous sets. That's what he wanted to do with this. So that's why we get this completely like actual scale of this Crimson Peak like mansion.
Yeah, I was watching some of the behind the scenes featurettes on this Arrow Blue that I got, and they fully built this whole fucking house. It is wild. I haven't seen the set design on a scale like this in quite some time. Like usually, they'll build a couple of rooms and then they'll have to like walk from this set to the other set and then we'll continue filming. And here it's like when Edith is getting chased down the stairs by Lucille, they literally built the house in part so that they could do that as a single take. And you're just like, that is epic scope.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first saw this, I was like, this house is so like grand and decadent. And, like, I love it and I want to live there. But now watching it in winter without a hole in my ceiling, I was like, you know something? Fuck this place. I mean, it's beautiful, but like it is, I think it really shows the Sharps sort of predicament, how they're like really looking for money in some ways. And like, I don't know, it's a beautiful place, but I guess, and this sounds very strange, but it's poor, I guess.
I was like, whoa, where is he going to bring out?
It's a poor person's mansion.
For sure.
No, it's like, it shows like the sumptuous nature of the time.
But you're not wrong, Greg. I mean, the reality is the people in the class that they're operating in would have looked at this and been like, you have a fucking hole in your roof. You have snow coming down. You've got this like red clay blood seeping from all the walls. But even beyond that, this place is in a huge state of disrepair. Like it's unacceptably poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dilapidated. We'll say dilapidated.
That's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's some high school literature knowledge right there. Probably got it from Great Expectations, which unfortunately is a book that I absolutely loathe. So attached to this film before the cast we had in place was Benedict Cumberbatch and Emma Stone. So they were going to be Thomas and Edith, respectively. They both dropped out, the latter because of scheduling conflicts, but the former for undisclosed reasons. I don't know. Like Cumberbatch had to release a statement basically saying that the split from the film was amicable, which makes me think that either the media was like making up this whole like, oh, like Cumberbatch is in a feud with Del Toro type things or whatever. I have no idea.
That's interesting because I saw
but he was small.
Yeah, I can't remember when the first Hobbit came out, but obviously, like his relationship with Del Toro is okay, or else he probably wouldn't have been Smaug.
Well, and Del Toro is just producing these films, not even directing those Hobbit films.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, principal photography began in Toronto at Pinewood Studios on February 10th and ended on May 16th, 2014. Fun fact, so again, they end in May of 2014. The movie comes out October of 2015. I think they had completely like finished the film by December of 2014, but Universal was like, well, we want this to be a Halloween release, so they just waited. They held on to it until October, which unfortunately might not have been the best idea.
No, I think if we're being realistic, this would have been a better Valentine's Day release.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it would have played well in the summer?
It's tricky. It's got that like big scope to it, right? Like it feels opulent, and I could see them trying to sell this as a bit of a tentpole. But the problem is like, even if you look at the cast, none of these people are bankable stars.
I mean, Hiddleston was, Thor or Loki in Thor. So people had known of him.
Yeah.
Well, for Wasikowska, I forgot. She broke out on the HBO show In Treatment. That was what got her all of her accolades originally. And then she did that horrible Alice in Wonderland movie. And honestly, that's the first thing that I saw her in. And I hated her. I was like, you are the blandest lead character I have ever seen in a movie in a very long time. Yep. And it wasn't until the kids are all right that I was like, oh, good. You can do something.
Yeah, she definitely strikes me as one of those actresses where she will perform up to the standards of whatever production she's in. So like if she is in a not great Tim Burton film, she's not great. But if she's in something that requires her to be legitimately talented, she's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll knock it out of the park for you.
Well, you know what though? Anne Hathaway was in a very boring Tim Burton movie called Alice in Wonderland, and she is amazing in that movie.
Is she a villain and or a witch?
She is a witch. But yeah, anyway, so As I said earlier, it had its world premiere at Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas on September 25th, 2015. That's where I was. It was then released theatrically about less than a month later on October 16th, 2015, where it was facing off against the other new releases, Goosebumps and Bridge of Spies, and some football movie called Woodlawn that I've never heard of. It opened in the number 4 spot with $13.1 million, which is not well below, but it's below the $15 to $20 million expectations that were had for it for opening weekend. It would go on to gross $31.1 million domestically and $43.6 million internationally for a worldwide gross of $74.7 million against a production budget of $55 million. And that's what I'm saying, like, domestically it is a flop, but like at least the international made up for it. But this was still, I would wager, a pretty big disappointment for Universal Studios.
I mean, I think the expectations were massive given Pan's Labyrinth sort of like, acclaim. And I mean, that movie, I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but I can guarantee you it made at least double what this made.
Yeah.
I think it legged it out too, right? Because it actually did get awards recognition. So it sort of played for a longer period of time. Whereas I feel like I remember this kind of coming out, not really doing much, and then quietly disappearing. And people just, ever since have said, oh, well, it just didn't do very well. So I guess it's a bad movie.
Well, but you want to talk directors failing upward, because of course, Del Toro would eventually go and do The Shape of Water, which also got award attention. But then what happened last year? Nightmare Alley, I think, is possibly the biggest flop of his career.
Yeah.
Financially speaking.
Yeah, and I love that movie. I gave that 5 stars. But yeah, it was kind of crazy that wasn't even up for awards recognition.
It was in the talks. But because it flopped so hard, I can guarantee you it just went out as soon as that happened.
Yeah, I think they looked at it and said, well, it's not worth spending our money on it. But it's interesting. Like, Trace and I covered that one for Patreon. And I feel like, Trace, that's a film where we also went in maybe with the wrong expectations. Because, Greg, we had just watched the original film. And they're kind of similar, but also just a little bit different.
They're pretty similar. It's Del Toro just remakes the first movie and adds 40 minutes to it.
So I'm curious to know if we were ungenerous towards it.
I mean, I would obviously say watch it again, because I think every Del Toro movie sort of deserves, I don't know, a second viewing, which is why I've been like really itching to rewatch Shape of Water, because I like hated it.
Oh, see, I love Shape of Water.
Yeah, I like Shape of Water a lot. I mean, the thing with Del Toro is I haven't seen Devil's Backbone, and I haven't seen Chronos, although I have those criterions like sitting on my shelf just waiting for me to watch. But I find with a lot of his more recent films, I do like Shape of Water a lot. That's probably my favorite out of his like recent batch of films. But I honestly always think they're very beautiful, but never really truly connect with a lot of the characters in his films. But I know that I'm in the minority with that, which is why I think I like stuff like Mimic, where I'm like, yeah, we're just doing a schlocky cockroach movie in the sewers. Like, yay.
Characters are unimportant. I don't need to care about these people.
Yeah, I mean, I care about the people or the characters of Crimson Peak. I just think
I do now.
Yeah, I just think it has one thing that it fails at, and we could get into that later. But yeah, I mean, even Shape of Water, I think I cared about them. I just really hated the sentimentality of it. Was like getting, a bagel and cream cheese from Dunkin' Donuts. You're like, I don't need this much cream cheese. And for me, it was just like too much of this thing.
See, that was the film of the most recent of his films that I did connect with the characters enough. But there's also a lot of queer undertones in that movie that I really resonated with.
Yeah, and I don't know. I find Sally Hawkins to me is like a very rootable actress. Like, when I see her, I always think of Underdogs. And yeah, I don't know. I think it was maybe the right movie for me at the right time. Like, it was the film I was looking for, and it delivered. Whereas I think a lot of his other films, like you, Trace, it's been a little bit more of a struggle to be like, I don't know. I go in wanting to have that, and then I think I try to force an emotional connection to it, as opposed to just saying, okay, how do I feel about this film?
Yeah, very much so. But going back to the box office for this, I mean, like, one issue, and I hate even saying this is an R-rated film. And much like Nightmare Alley, it's not even a hard R. It's just there are 2 or 3 moments where you're like, ooh, if you cut that, you would have a PG-13 rating. Right. And unfortunately, the market at the time when this movie came out was crowded with PG-13 cinema. And so, I mean, also because this is number 4, I know number 1 was Goosebumps, but like The Martian was still playing really well at theaters at the time. So like, it was too crowded. It wasn't the right time. So unfortunately, Universal thinking, ooh, October horror movie, didn't pay off.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, though, women represented 60% of the film's audience, with 55% of the audience being 25 or older. So yeah, none of the kids went to go see this movie.
Okay, you say weirdly. This is a fucking love story. Of course the majority audience was women.
But it wasn't marketed as one. It wasn't marketed as a love story. Right. Like that's you're right. I agree with you. But the way it was sold was very much to the horror crowd.
Yeah, but what's the demographic for like period pieces? You know, is it more women? Is it more of that age group? Because I think that's very obvious from the.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, and not to imply too that the horror crowd doesn't include women. I know there are like a good split of women in the horror genre, but like when it's marketing, they're clearly marketing towards teenage boys, you know?
Edith, can you pass Trace your shovel so that he can dig himself a little deeper?
Best weapon. I love it. As for reception, over on Rotten Tomatoes, we're looking at a 73% with an average score of, this is great, an average score of 6.6 out of 10. It has on Metacritic a 66 out of 100, and Letterboxd users have awarded it a 6.6 out of 10. So we are looking at a 66 all the way through all these critical aggregate sites.
Wow, it's like my grades when I was in middle school.
Yeah. Again, we're looking. That's like a 3 to a 3.5 out of 5. That's what we're looking at. That's the average.
Yeah. I can see it.
And yeah, I mean, like, the reviews or whatever, like, we'll talk, because I think we have enough to say. But yeah, after fucking Stephen King, after attending an early screening, horror writer Stephen King called the film gorgeous and just fucking terrifying, which
Stop it.
Probably isn't good for people walking into this movie.
What, he couldn't pull out the old Standby? Scariest movie ever?
Well, but then his son, Joe Hill, so he's like, Crimson Peak is Del Toro's blood-soaked Age of Innocence, a gloriously sick waltz through Daphne du Maurier territory. And while I think that may still be a little bit extreme, it's a much more accurate description of this movie.
For sure. I mean, I think Stephen King, you know, a lot of times when you see, especially up-and-coming horror writers, you'll see like a quote from Stephen King that's like, you know, the scariest mind of horror, or like, I don't know. He works in hyperboles, so I think you just have to take whatever he says as a great assault.
But you know, like with Terrifier 2, he was like, it's grossing you out the old school way. And I was like, there you go. There's a normal quote. Yeah. That's accurate.
Sometimes it feels like he's desperate to get those poll quotes on like every single piece of horror media. It's like, no, Uncle Steve, you don't need to. You're fine.
I think the problem is for me with that, and we can move on after this, like people know that now. Like I think whenever Stephen King does that kind of a quote for a movie, everyone rolls their eyes now.
Right. I mean, it kind of like when there's like, you know, a scene of like an author signing posters over and over again, I just feel like that's Stephen King, but with like pull quotes where he's just like, fuck it. Gotta say this, next one. It just, I don't know. It seems like someone just hands him a bunch of stuff.
Tabitha, like, what did we think of this one? Did we like this one?
In the bathroom.
Scariest?
Yeah, no,
yes.
Scariest
Okay, scariest movie.
Oh my god.
That was good.
Tabitha, was there a dog in this one? Can I say Cujo?
Yeah.
Scarier than Cujo. Stephen King. Slap it on the poster, which they will. Okay. Let's talk about the plot, because we do have a 2-hour movie to go through.
This is true, yes. Okay, so we begin with red-tinged credits. Always love a unique credit sequence. And then we have the sound of a heartbeat, and it transitions into Edith Cushing, who is played by Mia Wasikowska. And folks, in case you didn't know, the character name is a reference to novelist Edith Wharton, who, of course, also wrote Gothic romances.
Well, and I will say, though, we immediately open with this, like, you know, it's the end of the movie, as we already said, but it's like the Silent Hill fog.
Yes.
And I was very pleased to find out that the cinematographer for this movie, Dan Laustsen, is also the cinematographer on the original Silent Hill film from 2006.
Tabitha, what did we think of Silent Hill? Was it foggy enough? Was it like The Mist?
Foggiest movie today.
Slap it on the poster. Foggiest movie.
When you think about it, the Fog remake was 05, Silent Hill was 06, and then The Mist was 07.
Good years for Fog. Okay, so Edith is standing bloodied in the snow and fog and mist and all this other stuff. And we're getting her voiceover, and then we flash back to her mother's funeral. This is set in 1887 when she was 10. And we learn that her mother died of cholera. So it was a closed casket because, of course, she would have been completely black. And then that is how she appears that night when she comes to her as a smoky black apparition. Trace, I'm just going to make the quick complaint that once again, we have all of these ghosts being played by male identifying actors, and I'm annoyed by it. So this is Doug Jones.
I am less bothered by the fact that, because you can't even tell because they're all CGI. So they were clearly doing this just for Javier Botet and Doug Jones's like physicality. I'm not saying that there's not a woman that also has the same physicality, but like
we've all seen Malignant, folks.
Del Toro has a relationship with these actors, and I know this is technically the monstrous feminine because it's a ghostly like specter of a woman, but they're so CGI, which I don't think the CGI looks good. It doesn't really affect my opinion of the film that much, if only because I do like the way the red ghosts look as we get further into the film. It's fine, but it is kind of a weird thing where I'm like, but Del Toro, why aren't you using practical effects for these ghosts?
Yeah. Again, if you look at the featurettes on the Blu-rays, they actually show them in the makeup. And so it's actually CGI augmented, but the CGI augmentation doesn't make it look good. Like they should have just left it alone because the makeup and the costuming looks great just when they're, untouched up.
Yeah, I think they work best when they're grounded. I think like when you see the apparition or the ghost sort of floating there, it sort of points the finger at what it's sort of doing or what it is. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you're making a film that's harkening back to like, a period, and you're sort of like, telling a classic stories. So in my opinion, and I guess it doesn't matter really, but you should use classic effects. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, if you're going to say it's a throwback, make it a throwback, right?
Unless this is the subversion, like we're making a classic with modern contemporary FX.
Honestly, I'm wondering if the subversion is just that it's incest, because they couldn't do that back in the 40s.
We could only imply it.
I do think Edith is subverting it in where she goes, because if you watch, or read a bunch of other sort of Gothic novels or films, it's always, like a white stallion kind of comes in at the end and saves her, and we'll get there, but I do think that it subverts it. But it's sort of like Slumber Party Massacre, where you're like, you are subverting the male gaze, but you're also catering to it. Like there's things that you can't really escape ultimately.
I guess no, I guess in the case of Edith, like when I think of The Innocents, when I think of The Haunting, I love those lead actresses, but they're very I don't want to say
they're a little
weak.
passive.
Yeah, they're a little passive. Whereas I do appreciate, I appreciated Edith's strength in this movie more in a rewatch.
Yes, and Greg, you're absolutely right that like when we get the Alan character who's played by Charlie Hunnam, he's not the White Knight.
It's just Hunnam.
Hunnam.
It's like an Asian dish.
Yes, you know what? He's tasty but bland.
Charlie Hunnam.
Charlie Hunnam. He is not that White Knight. He tries to come in. He does not save the day. So I think that is the other kind of subversion that the film is doing. It's like, okay, we're going to give you not quite a final girl, but...
Man, Hunnam is my weak link in this film. And not even because of his acting. His role feels so superfluous to the plot. Like every time we cut back, I'm like, oh, right, he's in this movie. I feel like what should have happened was all of his scenes of investigating should have been condensed to the first hour of the film, and then he just shows up at the end, which would have made more sense. But the way we have the film, he's like, I'm gonna go, and it's like we get a scene, and then the next scene he's in London, and I was like, or he's in England, and I was like, didn't you have to boat there?
Yeah, I mean, the passage of time in this is sort of...
It's very questionable. Yeah.
Yeah, but it also feels sort of like classic storytelling where, all of a sudden, like, you turn a page and you're 3 months down the line. There's many times that I've seen this and never gotten like a full grasp of how long she's in Allerdale or Crimson Peak.
Yeah.
But I guess sort of toying with that, it asks you to wonder how long has she been like getting poisoned for, which, in case anyone hasn't seen the movie.
Right. Yeah, I guess I just think that it would have made more sense to be like, okay, like let's squish more of his scenes together so he feels more like an actual part of the plot, as opposed to giving us like 1 minute bits of him every like 20 minutes. And then he just shows up at the end of the day. I'm like, no, like, let us forget that he's in this movie and then have him show up to like save her. I think that would have made more sense to me, but again, minor nitpick.
Okay, so we're still all the way back in this like flashback to her mom's death, and all this to say, the black apparition says, "Hey, be careful about Crimson Peak," and this 10-year-old's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So let's flash forward. So let's flash forward 14 years. Edith is now living in Buffalo with her father. She is an aspiring author. And she's got this childhood friend, Dr. Alan McMichael, played by Charlie Hunnam. God, folks, can you please try to get it right? And she's also not popular with his mother, who is played by Leslie Hope. Fantastic Canadian actress.
We never like get a come up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come up into this woman, but I needed like some kind of like the last we see of her is the everyone has their place. I'll make sure you find yours. I'm like, no, give me something else. I love this.
Well, her place, I guess, is Crimson Peak, but yeah, the only thing I'd seen her in is 24.
Yeah, yeah, it's what she gets really famous for. It's so funny to see. Like, Canadian actors are almost like character actors. They pop up in a bunch of things, but then everybody always knows them for like the one thing that they kind of get famous for, which is always an international piece. So it's like, oh yeah, Leslie Hope, she's in a bunch of things. People know her as, that bitch from 24.
That bitch.
Well, I'm letting Canadians
Well, because she's
so.
Jack Bauer's wife, so she's very shrill.
Yes.
But don't they feel that way about his daughter?
Oh yeah. But that's mostly because she got chased by a cougar.
Yeah. But was that like a season-long thing? Is that what the big deal was? I've never seen that show, but I do know about that fucking cougar.
It was like 2 episodes, but it's kind of ridiculous when it's like, cut back to Alicia Cuthbert. She's on a hill.
I don't know Leslie Hope, so I had to look her up to be like, what do I know her from? She is in Slasher Season 2. She gets a good moment in Slasher Season 2.
Because Slasher's Canadian.
Just so people know, it's a literal cougar that is chasing her.
Oh, yeah, no. Alicia Cuthbert fighting a cougar like an old lady.
I'd fucking watch it.
Okay, I want that queer remake so badly. You know what? That's Greta 2, the direct-to-video release.
Greta 2, the cougar.
The cougar. Tabitha, did I like the cougar movie with Alicia Cuthbert? She puts her in a crate.
We're out of toilet paper.
That's captivity.
I mean, it's also Greta.
Slap that on the poster. Out of toilet paper.
Cut me up a t-shirt.
Captivity out of toilet paper? Oh my god, we are delicious.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So Ms. McMichael does not like her because, of course, she thinks that Edith is trying to get with her son and she thinks that he can do better, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, she goes to meet a publisher, Ogilvy, as you said, Trace, played by Jonathan Hyde. One scene only. Come on, man.
I was so I have not seen this man do much, but actually, I guess the Del Toro connection worked for him because the reason he's in this is because he was in The Strain for like 2 seasons.
Oh my god, The Strain. No.
I know, it's so bad.
Also filmed in Toronto.
Children of the 90s, again. Van Pelt in Jumanji, Westridge in Anaconda, the dude that says this ship can't sink in Titanic. Like, it is so...
Everything in the 90s.
This man was my 90s.
And he's so fucking good. I mean, I appreciate that he shows up here. You're like, oh my god, Jonathan, okay, you're gone. That's fine. But it reminds me of all of the things that I love him in.
Yeah, 100%. I wish he did more stuff nowadays. But yeah, I honestly, I couldn't tell you a single thing he's been in besides this and The Strain since the 90s.
Boy. yes. So we do get this kind of placeholder where he says, okay, I like your manuscript, but also you're a woman and it doesn't have enough of a love story in it. So she goes to her dad, Carter Cushing, who is played by Jim Beaver. Yes, everyone, dad from Supernatural. Moving on.
Oh, that's so funny because apparently his claim to fame is Deadwood. So
yeah.
Okay, respectability, Deadwood, and then like
everyone else.
Entry level genre is Supernatural.
I actually really like him in this movie. I find him to be a very endearing character.
Yeah.
Anyway, he gives her Chekhov's pen, but she's like, hey, how about this modern appliance, the typewriter? I believe you have one in your office. Can I go there, please? So I will be mistaken for a secretary by Thomas Sharp, who is played by Tom Hiddleston.
Well, but I do love that she's immediately like aware of gender roles, where she's like, well, my handwriting's too feminine, so I need to type this shit. Sorry, daddy. But the dad is like, I almost hate that he gets killed. I know he has to, like, to move the story along, but like, I would have watched a movie between Edith and her dad, like just like hanging out and talking.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that Jim Beaver, because he's also the sheriff in Joyride. There's also like a weird comfort to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I say this knowing very well that there's a ton of period piece shows that just get canceled, kind of like a one on HBO, The Nevers. That got canceled after, 6 episodes?
But that's probably the Joss Whedon effect, too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I watched every episode, and I kind of hated it. But I would also watch just, them existing in this, what is it, 1908?
I think so, yeah.
But that's kind of the thing, though. So this movie is actually, like, it's a full 2 hours, and the acts are all a full 40 minutes. So it's very evenly split. So again, if you're walking into this movie expecting a ghost story and a ghost haunting movie, you get that for the first scene, but then you have 40 minutes of this, which I was, again, a bit puzzled by on a first viewing, but I was I was pulled into all this drama on this rewatch.
Oh, yeah. This stuff is all really good. I enjoy the society stuff a lot, to the point where I think not only are we getting these fun character actors, but, there's a lot of quote unquote palace intrigue in the way that Edith is having to negotiate high society. And I think it clues us in that she's not like a dumb damsel that you might expect. Like, she is naive, she is young, but also she's going to be able to hold her own when she realizes, oh, hey, I'm being poisoned by these incest siblings.
These incest Yes.
Okay, so Thomas comes in, and yes, he's basically in America seeking funding for this revolutionary machine that he has invented, which he hopes will save the family fortune because it excavates clay very well. Unfortunately, because he has soft hands, he doesn't endear himself to Mr. Cushing, who reads him to filth immediately.
Great. So good. So good. Also, is clay like a really vital mineral? What do we use clay
bricks.
for?
Yeah, bricks. So back in the day, it would have been very important for any buildings.
Yeah. I mean, I just find it very funny because, like, this house is sinking into a clay mine. And they're like, you don't have the money to build this machine. Sorry, we're just going to let all that clay sit there.
Well, you still have to get it up, and you have to mix it with things. So, like, it's in the ground. You need to be able to dig it up, and that's what they can't do.
I mean, the most relatable thing about Thomas Sharp, and I really don't think that there's much outside of potentially falling in love, is that he's got this, like, dilapidated home, and he'd rather just spend it on this machine that excavates clay. And I'm like, you know something? Yeah, I fucking neglect responsibilities, and I just buy Blu-rays. Fuck it. I get it, dude. But yeah,
I don't want to say I don't find him relatable, because honestly, I feel like he has been, do I want to say groomed by his sister?
A little bit, yeah.
Like, I feel like he's a victim in all this. Like, I know when Lucille killed their mother, she was 14, he was 12, and so there's like an age gap there. It's not a big age gap, but it's enough to where I still kind of consider him a child, whereas I don't consider her a child. It's like that statute of limitations.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they are both groomed.
Well,
by
I think
their
they're
mom.
also styled in that way.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say he was groomed by his sister, but yes, that also applies too.
Okay, so Edith observes that he is hard-pressed for money because he seems to be wearing a 10-year-old suit. So that's another kind of character trait, that she is a writer, so she's constantly observing people, taking note of important details to tell the story. even though she doesn't really seem to have like they have that bit of a meet cute, but it doesn't really go much further because obviously her dad is like, get out of here, you're a charlatan. She goes home and it's like very telling that she just kind of plops onto her bed and she starts reading up about his UK manor, which is of course named Allerdale Hall. And I'm just like, oh, that's the equivalent of a young teenage girl going up to her room and like looking at pictures of a boy in like some kind of teen bop magazine, right? She's like, oh, I'm enthralled by this man.
Which I know it's par for the course with this genre of film, literature, whatever the fuck.
Mm-hmm.
But we're running into the what lies beneath scenario where it's like, Ghost, why didn't you say beware of Allerdale Hall? Mm-hmm. Instead of Crimson Peak.
They get her there.
It's so true though, right? Like if the ghost would just learn how to fucking spell it out. Don't do your generic haunting. Don't spell things out in the mirror. Don't rattle a fucking doorknob.
You know. What? What do I know? I know a lot of things.
Yeah, it's like the I Know You Did Last Summer effect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just so funny when she finally like learns what the name of the place is, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, Crimson Peak! Oh no!" And you're just like,
"It's like an hour and 10 minutes into the movie, and you're like, bitch, way ahead of you."
I thought you were smart.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, she gets a second ghostly warning, and then Thomas comes in out of the rain, and he has basically been waiting for her father to leave so he could come in and be like, hey, I can't negotiate fine society. Will you please come to this party with me? So she ends up agreeing because, of course, she's secretly falling in love with him. And this is our introduction to Lucille. Of course, we see her from behind as she's playing the piano. We have to hear how good she is at playing. We have to see how rapt the audience is. Like, she's totally got the room enraptured. And then, oops, Thomas and Edith walk in and they steal her thunder, and she's not very happy about it.
So this is still Jessica Chastain. I mean, she's not like an unknown by this point, right? Like, she's done Zero Dark 30, but like, I forgot it was The Help that like really shot her off, where it was like, oh, people were like, oh, that's the role, that like that's the star in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
She was gonna play Edith, and then she told Del Toro, I want to play Lucille.
Well, yeah, because it was like, what, Mama, and then also the same year she did The Martian. She did Interstellar. What year was Interstellar?
Yeah.
Year before.
I mean, she'd been up and coming for a while, but like it was a series of sort of like, when is this woman going to break out?
Well, this wasn't about October for her than if she was in The Martian, because The Martian beat this movie to the ground.
Yeah, a pulp.
Yes.
Oh, she was
not
in
in
Take
space.
Shelter. It's a great movie.
Oh yeah, that's the Michael Shannon one, right?
Yeah, the Jeff Nichols.
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
So I did just want to give a quick shout out to costume designer Kate Hawley. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, I think the set design in this movie is outstanding, but then the second notable item is the costumes. And of course, people have written extensively about her work in other films. She did Pacific Rim, Edge of Tomorrow, The Hobbit trilogy, Suicide Squad. But for this movie specifically, she had a color scheme for each character, which to me is, in some ways, I think very accessible. It also sometimes feels a little bit like film school 101. Like, you can really just show this movie to people and say, hey, keep an eye on the colors. They'll tell you things that you need to know about who the characters are. So, Edith is always dressed in white and gold because she's the heroine. She is a ray of light. We've got Thomas is always in faded dark colors, suggesting that he is poor, but also that he is like slightly groomed towards the dark side. We have Lucille, who is always in these very impeccably well-designed, but very sharp, vivid, tight clothing, suggesting she's very uptight, restrictive. And then we have Alan in this kind of reassuring tobacco brown colors. Yeah, bland, boring.
Well, because she also did the costumes for Mortal Engines, which I think is another beautiful movie that also really tanked.
Mm-hmm.
Del Toro produced that, didn't he?
Yeah, and that's another Peter Jackson combination one.
Oh God, don't get mad at me, but sometimes I get like Peter Jackson properties and Del Toro properties mixed. I'm sorry, the producing qualities.
It's because they work together a lot, so they both produced that. Neither one of them directed it.
Yeah, so, well, maybe that was the mistake. No, I'm not a big fan of yellow as like a clothing item. I want to bathe in Edith's yellow gown.
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
And well, when we get to it later, but whatever Edith's thing is when she's running down that staircase in that one shot, like I want all of that on my body.
It's like a nightgown, yeah. I mean, like they definitely dress her like a butterfly, you know, as opposed to the moth that is Lucille.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that shot was in every trailer too, and that's the one image that sticks out of my mind is Lucille running down that staircase with the wind like blowing her fabric up.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's like so the best part of this film. I mean, it's also, I think, very obvious why Edith is not the right role for Jessica Chastain, and Lucille was a very good fit. Not only because I think Jessica Chastain can do severe, but she's the fun character in this movie, right?
Well, but I think, again, I mean, if you're looking at Chastain's previous roles, I mean, like, granted, I have not seen Zero Dark 30, so maybe she's a badass bitch in that, trying to get Osama bin Laden. I don't really know.
Oh, she's hardcore. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Because to me, I mean, The Help, she is, because Bryce Dallas Howard is the cunt in that movie. And then you have Jessica Chastain is like the, oh my God. So she fits the Edith role there. That's all. So seeing her in this is my first like, oh shit, she's evil. Loved it.
Yeah, because before this, she was, you know, Lawless and Tree of Life. I feel like those, maybe not Lawless, but Tree of Life, she's just like, you know, the maternal, sort of the comfort, you know. So I think like, taking this role, it's the same as like Molly's Game, or Zero Dark 30, where she's like, okay, I think it's going to subvert people's expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why people have really responded to her, because she's really good at a diverse bunch of roles. Like, it's hard to kind of pigeonhole her and say, oh, she's that type of actress. Like, she doesn't just do one type of genre.
Which is why, I mean, look, I know we all have like mixed thoughts on It Chapter 2, but that's why I really liked her accepting that role. I was like, I mean, of course, it was like a guaranteed moneymaker, but I was like, you didn't have to do this clown horror movie. So good for you, Oscar winner.
Tabitha, did we like the It adaptations?
We're still out of toilet paper.
I had to be, wait, did she win an Oscar? But she won an Oscar last year. She got the Oscar for Tammy Faye, so I'm fine.
Oh, right. Yes. Wow. Okay.
That face and makeup.
Okay, so Daddy hires Mr. Holly, who is played by character actor Bern Gorman.
Everyone, if you listen to our episode on Watcher, he's the Watcher. Love this man. He's so creepy looking.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting here because he's not playing a baddie. He's just a little bit shady because he's a private investigator.
Yeah, of the 1800s where you're like, of the 1900s where you're like, what do you have to do that?
It means you literally have to like travel places to go and look up things.
I have to use books.
Books.
I mean, that's why we joke that the bitch should have known about Crimson Peak, but it's like, well, unless somebody wrote it down, how was she to know?
The ghosts just know the gossip of what the people call Allerdale, but she didn't. She refrained to read the big sign gate that greets you when you're in Allerdale.
Plus, she was like, you know, more of a Mary Shelley fan, so maybe she was like, "There's no windmill, we're good to go."
I do like that.
That was a really good comeback, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, the reality is that her reference of Jane Austen is appropriate because, of course, Jane Austen did publish under a male pseudonym because it was the only way she could get published. But yeah, I mean, Mary Shelley is obviously a better fit for the story we're telling here.
But even as she's like, oh, I prefer Mary Shelley. Yeah, she died a widow.
Okay, so we also get a little bit where Alan introduces Edith to the concept of latent images. And this is a fun thing, the kind of thing you would expect in a Del Toro film, but also it cues us in that Alan, well, he is, yes, boring. He also has a mystery-loving heart to him. So he is interested in the supernatural. He has a penchant for mysteries.
You know what? I will give it that, though. He knows Edith is into this, and he doesn't, like, look down on her for it. Like, he's very much like, look, I'm into this, too. Fuck me.
I mean, I read that as the inference. Like, he wants to fuck her, and she's just like, "You're my best friend."
Yeah, and he's like, "I got a big old dick, maybe average sized dick over here for you. Fuck me. Here's some ghosts."
I hear you like ghosts.
I've got a ghost for you.
God, I was just gonna make a hog joke because of Sons of Anarchy, but you know what? Let's move on.
It's fine. We all know that Katie Seagal is the star of Sons of Anarchy.
It's true. She's the one with the big dick on that show.
Yeah, she is. She really is.
Katie Seagal, love her. Okay. So yes, he also warns her away from Thomas. So of course, the next scene that we see is them on a date in the park. It should be noted that the production went to extreme lengths to color code the two like regional differences. So in North America, it's very like kind of golden, which means that Edith is at home. It's also very populated. So like in this scene in particular, we're seeing lots of people out at the park. It's a busy activity. It's teeming with life, even though yes, we do have butterflies who are being eaten by ants in close up. But when we jump over across the pond, it's desolate,
Gray.
It's wintry, there's nobody around.
So I wrote in my notes, I was like, oh, because I was surprised. I was like, oh, wow, we've got Thomas and Lucille conspiring 25 minutes into this movie. And I think that threw me a little bit on a first time watch. And then, so, okay, let's have this discussion here.
Yeah.
This movie, do y'all think it's trying to be a mystery?
No.
Yeah, I agree with you to an extent. Well, when we get to the murder of Edith's father, because I'm like, why are we even hiding who this is? You can tell it's Chastain's hair. But I remember on a first watch, that was a hurdle for me because I was like, this movie's being a very bad mystery because it's not hiding anything. But I feel like on a rewatch, maybe on a first time watch for some people, it's clearly very intentional. This movie is not trying to hide shit, except for the identity of her dad's murderer for a bit.
I mean, it literally zooms up on ants eating a moth, and I don't know, it was more blatant than that. So
yeah, it was definitely a stumbling block for me the first time I saw it as well. I still didn't kind of catch it though because I think I didn't have the frame of reference of the other films. Like I hadn't seen Rebecca. I never read Great Expectations, even though obviously like you're aware of the property, but I just didn't have the background in Gothic horror or Gothic romance. So I just thought, yeah, it was kind of doing a shit job at being a mystery. And I didn't understand why we kept having to see these scenes because it felt like the movie would then explain it, like we keep seeing them make tea and then 2 scenes later, Edith coughs up blood. And you're like, oh, what's the correlation?
I mean, like I said earlier, this feels like a book that already exists that has been adapted into a film. So like the scene when Lucille kills Edith's dad, it is hiding it because then later when we get the reveal, we have the flashback where it's like, oh, look, it's her. I was like, yes, we know, movie. I get it. But I can see like if you were reading a book where it's like, and a dark, cloudy, shrouded figure came and like bashed his head into the sand. I can imagine reading that. And this is like the adaptation choice of how we're filming that murder. But it's an original film. That is the only part of the movie where I'm like, why are we hiding this? Like, you're not hiding anything else in this movie. Why are we hiding this part of it? But I guess because they want you to think that maybe Thomas is the one killing him, not Lucille.
Yeah, and I mean, I think... But the thing that's weak about that is that when we have the ballroom scene, we even have Lucille whisper to Thomas, now is the time. So, like, she's clearly pulling the strings, And I feel like if they leaned a bit more into Thomas Sharp being sort of the conductor, he's the caboose this entire fucking movie.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a weak part of it. And ultimately, the romance, which we can get into later, that's just my most recent feeling about the movie. I think it fails on the romance because I think that Thomas is a bit too duplicitous. Like, the way that he's cast is very, like, the shadows are always creating a Two-Face. I feel like you see him often talking to Lucille in the shadows, sort of spurring this thing on, and I really don't feel like he tries to put any sort of halt to their plan until it is, like, fucking too late, and you're like, dude, I don't know, if you loved her, and I do think that, like, it really wants us to buy their love, and I don't. But everything else is working on, like, cylinders, like firing on all cylinders, where I think that, like, it makes up for this in a way.
I'm glad that you said that, but I almost feel like romance implies both of them. When I don't want to say she's too naive or something, but she always just seems like I'm doing this because my dad just, almost as if she's doing this out of grief. Like she's like, I have nowhere else to go. Let's do this. You do need to buy that he is slowly falling in love with her. And I do agree that but I buy him falling in love with her. The same as I buy that he's still being pulled by Lucille and like is just too afraid to break from that link from her until it's too late. And you're right. Like he waits way too long to be like, don't drink that fucking tea. But I don't know. I don't necessarily buy them as a couple, but I buy his feelings towards her, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two elements that I have issues with are the mystery and the romance. And I think the mystery pulls away from the romance because it's trying to sort of pull the wool over our eyes by saying, hey, Thomas is in control because he's the one who's whispering to Lucille, and you think Thomas is the one that murders her father. And so I feel like if it ultimately was just Jessica Chastain or Lucille pulling the strings, and you saw that, you'd be able to be like, okay, I'll buy the love. He's just torn because she's in control. And it's trying to like have its cake and eat its too kind of thing. And it's really weird because I've seen this movie multiple times and it's just this last time where I'm watching it and I'm like, I don't feel it, you know?
Were you watching it with a critical eye before? Is this the first time you're watching it like with a critical eye where you're like, I'm going onto a podcast to talk about this, whatever I want to say?
No, because I wrote that piece for Rue Morgue in 2020, so I watched it like two or three times. And I usually watch things with closed captioning. I will say I think this might be the first time I actually watched it with closed captioning because I was very taken aback by Lucille whispering, "Now is the time," which I didn't really hear before because it's very much like a kind of blink and you miss it sort of scene. But
no. You're right. No, it's almost indistinguishable without subtitles. And then I saw the subtitle and I was like, oh, I did not know that's what she said.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and which I think is why I really, and I mean, I love Crimson Peak, but I think it's why I really love Nightmare Alley. And I think people were like, oh, I don't know if Del Toro can do this sort of harsh cynicism or like pointed meanness sort of thing, but like he goes all in. He doesn't try and sort of juggle things. He's just like, okay, Bradley Cooper's character is this guy like through and through, and that's there's nothing else I'm trying to do. And with Crimson Peak, I feel like he's just trying to do too much, and I think they're at odds with each other. And I don't know. That's why, like, when I watch this, I'm like, okay, the ghost scenes are actually kind of chilling. The romance is less so. So I'm like, okay, it's sort of faltering in one area, even though I think it's sort of doing all the trappings of like an old classic, Gothic love story. I just wish it wasn't doing the mystery aspect because I think it's just really weak.
Yeah, it's tricky. I definitely agree with that because particularly on this rewatch, every time the two siblings kind of like go into the shadows and hatch their master plans, I just thought, is this because the movie doesn't trust us to understand what's going on? Or is it that it's, like you said, Trace, not trying to actually hide this from us? In which case I then go, well, why do we need these scenes at all? Because really the movie still explains itself at various intervals. Like it's not particularly complicated to understand, oh, they're doing this for the money, they're not good. Like to me, the only part of the mystery that truly works is when Edith discovers the two of them in bed together, because you're like, oh, I was getting a bit of it, but I thought maybe I was misreading something. They could just be affectionate siblings, or they've been isolated up on this fucking mountaintop for like however long. And it's only really then that you start to realize, oh, okay, they're not just murderers, they're not just bad people, but also they're in love with each other.
But that's where it's like, I don't know, like when we go into, okay, we're doing Gothic romance, we're doing like these influences of like very classic novels and films, where it's kind of like, well, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, honestly. It's more like it plays out so straightforwardly, but I also kind of want a fan edit where you remove those scenes of Thomas and Lucille conspiring and see how the movie plays.
Does it play better?
Does it play better? Yeah, maybe it will. I don't know. And honestly, that fan edit probably does exist.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this. It's also the way it frames it. You know, like a lot of times, like they're in the distance, they're drenched in shadows, and I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the mystique and mystery are all very much part of like the literary Gothic sort of romance,
Yeah.
but I don't
Mhm.
know. Like, you cannot have one sort of belittle or take away from the romance because ultimately it is a Gothic romance.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in a lot of these examples that we provided, we are always in the POV of the Edith character. We don't
Mhm.
leave that POV. And this film does that. And maybe that's also a
Yes.
subversion that Del Toro was talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But again, then I'm kind of like, well, but does it work that way? Again, I still really like this movie, but because
Love
to
it.
me,
Yeah.
the predictability of it only really affects my first time watch, where I'm like, oh, well, that's not really like, blah. But watching it, like knowing what it is, I'm kind of like, it's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me as much as it did on the first time watch, but I'm still kind of confused as to what the intent was here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, when I was sort of rewatching some key scenes earlier, and my partner was on the couch and they were watching the scene in the ballroom in which Lucille's playing the piano and they walk in and they brought up, uh, was their initial plan to go with Eunice, you know? Like, were they always going
Mhm.
after Edith and like her father? And I feel like they were. I felt like the plan never was for Eunice. You know, I feel like the dance never would have happened if Eunice was in that role. I know it's trying to say,
Oh.
you know, you need to be in control or like whoever's leading, you know, with the candle, but ultimately it's a dance.
Right.
Like it's two people. And I think that like, you know, sort of symbolizes more of the sharps working together and moving and at the end, you know, because he starts to sort of feel something for her, the candle goes out and their dance is done.
Right.
That's interesting, Greg. I don't know that I entirely agree with that, but you raise an interesting point. I think maybe the plan was always to go with Eunice, but then because by this point Thomas has already started to fall
Yeah.
for Edith, that's why he makes the switch and he says, "Okay, I'm going to do the dance. We'll see if it seals the deal."
And at that point, I buy the romance. Like I love that dance. Like I think it's like,
It's better.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
they have good chemistry there.
yeah, and it's shot beautifully. Like I think it's like the editing is something I really love in this movie. But yeah, I buy the romance. It's not until it starts to sort of after Carter's death where it starts to employ the mystique and the mystery of it, where like it starts to unravel this like
Yeah.
thread.
And that's where I think keeping it in the POV of Edith would have probably helped the mystery aspect of this film. Honestly, it may have even helped the romance aspect of this film.
Yeah, no, I
Maybe.
agree. Yeah.
Okay. So Thomas makes plans to propose. He basically says, "Hey, give me this family ring," which is this large, gaudy kind of ruby thing. It's just so ostentatious, but it's kind of hilarious in how it matches Jessica Chastain's costuming a lot of the film as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, before he can actually make that proposal, this is when Mr. Hawley returns with some kind of damning evidence. This is, again, part of the mystery. We don't exactly know, but obviously he has dug up some kind of dirt. And this is when Carter pulls them aside, dresses them both down, both of the sharps, and says, "I'm going to give you this money to fuck off, but you have to break her heart first."
So what he finds out, he sees the story about the dead mother, and he's like, "You two fuckers killed your mother." And then he also knows that Thomas is already married
Right.
because no one goes to look for the women that he marries and brings home.
I mean, he marries women from foreign countries, so presumably at this day and age, it would have been much harder to have like launched a search or something.
I love how he's like, "Oh, I'm going to tell my daughter. Don't you worry." I'm like, maybe you should have told her first.
Hmm.
Yeah, also, I mean, like, when you get the audio recording that they record, they don't sound like foreign women. They just sound like other rich white women whose
Hmm.
Well,
dad maybe have been murdered or you know.
they said they went after like granted we don't get to meet these women outside of their ghost form, but they said like they
Hmm.
went for women who had big dreams, who were wanting to do something, but like they were also there was something about them that would make that no one cared about it. Oh, it's like the Belle from Beauty and the Beast effect, but it's like, oh, she's a little odd because she likes books, we don't care about her. So they're like,
No.
let's marry her, no one's gonna give a shit about her.
She even like walks through mud in the beginning, you know?
Yeah. There goes the banker with his
oh my god,
tray,
no,
like
stop
always.
it. We're not doing every 2 weeks. We're doing a Beauty and the Beast reference, please.
Oh, right. We had the mob song a couple of weeks ago. I forgot about that.
Ooh, that's a good song.
Okay. So yes, Thomas does end up breaking Ada's heart in a very spectacular public fashion. I was like, you didn't have to be that mean.
Okay, no. They're in like the stairwell away from the party and he yells at her. And so everyone just comes and rallies around him to watch him take this woman down.
And he drags her.
It's enjoyable.
Drags her through the mud.
Yeah. Greg, you mentioned some of the editing. I do want to give this movie a shout out for using an iris transition between scenes. It's very much selling this kind of fairy tale book quality, right?
Yeah. We get the one on the ring. We get the one. It's always highlighting something, right? Like we're like, okay, well, I guess that's important for later.
Yeah, and in this case, it's, there's Lucille hiding in the fucking shadows.
Oh, I love that shot, though, because it's like she's just covered in darkness. I love that shot.
Yeah, I mean, I love the way it sort of implies that, like, Lucille almost is already dead. Like, she's sort of like a ghost herself, because she is an extension of her mom who's dead. Yeah, I love all those shots. Really well done.
Oh my god, that's what this movie's missing. It's missing Thomas being like, you're just as bad as mom was.
Right. I'm actually surprised we don't get a mom. Do we get their ghost mom at any point?
We do, in the bathtub.
Oh, that's who she is. Okay.
Yeah, because cleaver in the head almost split her skull completely in half. Love that.
All right. So the very next day, after this public debacle goes down and the siblings have been paid off, Carter is mysteriously and brutally murdered in this old-fashioned men's bathroom.
I love how nice he is to his servants. He's like, if you would be so kind, thank you. Oh my god. I love the paper.
Yeah, but if they were like, oh, all we have is decaf, he'd be like, what the fuck?
You're fired.
But yeah, I mean, I'm watching that. I'm like, this guy starts his day like this every morning, shaving with coffee, eggs. Son of a bitch.
Oh, a little bit of port.
Oh, I did love that detail. He's a day drinker.
I really shouldn't, but I think today I will.
Is it Saturday?
It's like, I got rid of the sharps. Time to be naughty.
Does it end with Y?
In that case, port. Yes.
Yes, please pour it. Pour it up.
Okay, so Edith then gets a letter from Thomas. So she makes what I wrote in my notes as a rom-com dash to go and catch him.
Oh my god.
At the hotel.
I wrote my notes, this rom-com bit of her trying to catch him at the hotel before, but he's already gone.
Oh no, it's just the maids there. Sorry, you missed him. He just got on the plane. I mean, no, sorry, he just left.
Actually, the little detail that I really liked was when she runs into his room and the maids are they're black maids and they're like laughing and having a good time. And the second she runs in, they're like,
yeah, their complete demeanor changes.
Yeah,
don't fire us. We need these jobs.
Yes. Oh god.
Yeah.
I mean, these are also the only people of color in this entire movie. We only see black servants.
Yes.
It's very white.
Okay, yeah, so they end up kissing and the score swells and it's immediately undercut because then she learns that her dad has died.
I will say this. Wasikowska's performance during
in the morgue scene?
The morgue scene is really good. I mean, I wrote, she's like, he's turning 60 next week. He's afraid of looking his age. You see, this
it's all good.
Really good.
I actually feel like that's my favorite part of this film in terms of like the emotional component. Like the romance for me does not work at all. I don't buy either side of it, but her relationship with her dad to me is kind of the cornerstone. It does allow me to believe that, she would make a very bad impulsive decision and say, okay, well, I guess I'll just marry this man who shows me affection at both the morgue as well as the funeral.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you get the sense that, I don't know, all she has is her dad. And then, what is she left with? But, I mean, that scene right there was like, I think one of her best acted scenes, because I love her in Maps of the Stars and Piercing. the Ryo Murakami adaptation.
Yeah, piercing. Good call.
Yeah, she's really good, but like, yeah, I mean, what we talked about before, Alice in Wonderland, woof.
No. It's just that movie isn't about actors. It's about special effects. So the actors are just there to move the plot maybe around. Okay.
End of Act 1, by the way.
I was going to say, so this is where we transition over. So we move over to Cumberland, England, and the carriage is arriving at Allerdale Hall. We see that it is situated at the top of a hill of red clay. And we talked about the sets and the production design. I'll just name the individual responsible. That would be Tom Sanders.
All right.
Who also did Bram Stoker's Dracula. One of the best looking movies ever.
Fucking perfect.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Good on you, Greg. Thank you for that.
That's why I'm here.
I mean, just everything about this house is sheer perfection. Yeah. So I actually have a question for the two of you. In terms of iconic horror or horror adjacent houses, you know, we talked about The Shining. Obviously, that's one. But would you say that this is like in the pantheons? Is it better than some of the Dark Castle houses like House on Haunted Hill or 13 Ghosts?
I wish we had more exterior shots of this house. I'm not going to lie. I feel like I really know the interiors of it, but I never really get a lot of exterior shots because even with The Haunting, even the 1999 remake of The Haunting, they really get like the scope of how big and enormous this house. And I know this house is like enormous, but like I wish we had more of that. But I love the interior. I think it's all gorgeous, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. I think it's better than all of those except for the Robert Wise Haunting. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the 1999 one because I saw it in theaters and like I love the rooms. I think it like puts a lot of emphasis on like the hallways and then you have the staircase.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it sort of focuses on minimal rooms within a larger scale house. And I think here it's like, yeah, you have the stairs, you have the kitchen, you have her room, the hallways, like the bathroom. I love it. I mean, it's a lot of times when I watch a movie that takes place within a house, I'm like, what the fuck? They didn't show enough of this. There wasn't. I didn't get a sense of direction, scope. And I think that's why, like, you know, The Shining is always brought up because it's like you get a sense of it while also not, you know, it's just like the hallways make no sense, you know. But the 1999 Haunting, I will go ahead and say I haven't rewatched it, but I will say I like it.
I don't think it's as bad as everyone says it is. I mean, like, from a production standpoint, I think it's fantastic. It's just really long and I mean, I saw it in theaters when I was 10 years old. And granted, I was a 10-year-old kid who really wanted to go see Sleepy Hollow, but couldn't. So I had to go see The Haunting instead, which is fine because I really wanted to see that too. But I loved it as a kid. I didn't learn until much later in life that it was a very like maligned film. And I actually have not watched it since like I found out it was maligned. And so I don't know how it would play for me now. But as a kid, I loved it.
Yeah, I thought its casting was really great outside Owen Wilson, who I don't even recall, because I've read the book too, I just don't recall who he plays, but I thought Catherine Zeta-Jones was excellent.
She's good, but no, Owen Wilson plays Luke, and he gets decapitated by a big old lion head.
I mean, that doesn't mean he's good. That just means his death is good.
He's the comic relief. But it's like Chekhov's, whatever that thing is in the chimney. But again, a 10-year-old in the theater watching a PG-13 horror movie where this guy just gets decapitated.
Trace was born.
It's arguably the best part of the film.
It is a really good part of the film, actually. But anyway, all right, continue.
Okay, so we have shifted over to this kind of cold, desolate, isolated place, and almost immediately we also notice that Edith is seeing things. So she sees a ghostly apparition in the elevator, but then also we really see a change come over Lucille, who is now very controlling and very chilly.
And this is where the Rebecca stuff comes in, right? Like,
yes,
this is
Mrs. Danversing it up and down.
So good. Wait. Actually, Joe, question for you, because you have mentioned on a couple previews for this episode that you're like bisexual energy Jessica Chastain.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you pulling that from in this movie?
Okay, I was actually going to pull this in later, but we can have the conversation now. I see it. One is that Jessica Chastain is actually on record as sort of covertly playing Lucille as she thinks about women and has no interest in men except for her brother.
Right.
So technically, it wasn't something she was directed to do, even though all of the actors were apparently given like extensive character study notes, like backgrounds, things that you like and things that you don't. Like apparently, Lucille does not like American music or big teeth. That was one of the things that Del Toro gave her.
So that tooth to gum ratio, she's like, nope, no Gina Davis for me.
You got to get the fuck out of here. But yeah, so Chastain took it upon herself to say, like, part of her buttoned up sort of very restrictive personality is in part a response to that. And then the other piece that I draw it from is the fact that Thomas is always the one who has to get married. So this is his fourth marriage. He always has to go out. And you could argue that it's because Lucille is like more fucked up. She doesn't like to leave the house and she's not good with people. But I also look at it as, oh, her relationship is that she likes to take care of women. It started with her mom, but then when she was poisoning all these women, she was doting on them. She was looking after them. It's very much the kind of relationship that you have where it's like misery. You want to make that person incapacitated so that then they have to rely on you.
She's Munchausen's by proxying them.
Yeah, it's Munchausen by proxy for sure. Especially when she talks about the relationship that she had, like nursing her mother back to health. I was like, oh, you like doing that to all of these women. And also you enjoy keeping things like their suitcases down in the cellar. You've got these mementos of these women, I think in part because you wanted to fuck them as much as...
You know, I didn't even think of that because I was very much like, why the fuck did she keep this bitch's trunk in the basement? Like, and the key on her keychain.
Mm-hmm.
But
oh, Enola wanted to pork you, had to kill you.
Because when watch, because I was trying to look for this going in, and I was like, well, she just wants to fuck her brother. I love that. I did not pull that even on my own, like watching that last night. So I'm glad that you actually used that. You provided textual evidence for your claim.
I mean, not really. It's very, very inferred. And I think you could just as easily say, oh, well, the queer element is that, oh, it's an incest relationship.
No, but there's the scene sort of later on in the third act where Edith is like really sick and she like leans in. She's like, I'm going to take care of you. It's okay. Like almost like don't trust him. And watching that, I was like, I think there's like an instance in which she's actually falling for Edith. And that's what sort of makes her more upset that Edith isn't reciprocating and that she doesn't get to partake in this relationship because it's very much like almost like a phantom thread thing where it's like, I'm making you sick, but like, I actually love it when you're weak and I get to dote on you,
Yes.
But it's the egg scene.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's because you, obviously, surface level, you can read it as, well, she's really mad that her brother fucked someone else because she wants her brother for herself. But she has the confrontation with Edith, not with Thomas.
Yeah.
So, and that's vital. That's vital to that read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, of course, we have this history of reserved lesbians. Like, if we read her as the Miss Danvers of this house...
Yes, if you want to make this a Rebecca comparison, bam, right there.
Yeah, and like I think about her performance is that like for most of it she comes off like a Miss Havisham from like Wuthering Heights, very like sort of very old in her ways, but then like, and this might paint a bad picture of me, when she gets caught digging deep into her brother's pants, it's kind of hot.
I wrote, oh my god, she's giving him an angry handy J.
It's like, fine, I will do this for you. You just have to promise that you're going to kill this girl that I have feelings for. It's like, oh, I hope she's using some kind of lubricant because that is going to like rub him raw.
Girl, like, okay, you can cut this out, but like when you're masturbating and you pre-cum and like you like rub the tip of your dick raw, which I've absolutely done before, worst feeling in the world. And then it gets like a scab over it later because you rubbed it raw.
Oh my god, how hard are you masturbating?
I was a teenager.
Oh, okay. I was like,
no,
if this was recent, we have to talk.
Okay,
yesterday?
No. So it's like like if Well, actually, it might not work if you're uncircumcised. I'm sorry, because you have your foreskin. But if you don't have foreskin and you pre-cum, it just gets on the top of your head, so you're ready, but then it dries out, and so you keep jacking off, and it's like friction on your dick head, and it starts to hurt. And you're like, but I still want to come, so you keep going, but you've rubbed it so raw that literally like 2 days later, it's like a layer of dry skin over your dick head.
Ouch!
That's why I wish I was uncircumcised. I wish I had foreskin.
Well, as someone who still has theirs, there's pros and cons. So
yeah, there's always pros and cons.
Both of you. Okay, I need someone else in my court to understand this.
You're not gonna get it here. Sorry.
I know.
Okay, so the weird elements just kind of keep adding up. We've got ghosts occasionally showing up. We've got Edith running a bloody bath, but of course that's just a response to the clay that's in the soil around the house. Yes, we've got the Enola key that of course reveals a suitcase that has evidence that Thomas was trying to sell various things.
All the information she needs is on these gramophone things. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate that because literally, so when we go from Act 2, which is 80 minutes into the movie, and we got 40 minutes left, Edith knows everything. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think her finding all of it so easily and all of it laid out, it kind of makes the mystery angle a bit insulting, where it's just like the movie's like, try and figure it out. We're giving you clues, but then it's just like, no.
Or it's all here.
But that's what I'm like. Does the movie have a mystery angle? I'm like, I don't know. I want to talk to Del Toro and be like, what were you doing with this? Like, what was going on here? Did you think you were making a mystery, or did you not? And you were like, fuck it, we'll just throw in some mystery elements, even though there's no mystery here.
I mean, isn't the co-writer also the one who did Mimic?
Yes.
So
wow, Greg cannot let that go.
I'm just saying, Mimic has a mystery angle that's really just like terrible.
I rewatched Mimic 4 years ago and still really liked it, but now knowing that you hate it, I might be like, maybe I'm not gonna watch this movie. Just see what it's like.
You're gonna love it more.
I know.
Probably.
I'm like, fuck Greg.
Yeah. Him and his uncircumcised D.
So now we have to keep that whole conversation.
I know. You know what? Fine. Fuck it. I'll let people know that I've rubbed my dick raw via masturbation.
You know what? Relatable content, Trace. That's what we're here for. Young boys, don't rub your dick raw while masturbating.
If you have foreskin, though, you're fine.
All right, moving on. Let's talk about this picture of Mama in the kitchen, because did she pose for that painting and did she sign off on it? Because she looks like a fucking crone.
Honestly, the missing element in this movie is, what room is this? It's a library, right?
It's a library /
piano room.
Music room, yeah.
Okay.
So the idea is that each of the siblings have like half of the room. It reflects their personality.
I always think about Scary Movie 2 when it's like, Cindy, the music room, check the fucking music room. This portrait needed to be over the fireplace in the main hall. I don't know why it wasn't here. Like this specter of this portrait needed to be looming over the entire film.
Yeah, but there was no main hall, was there?
Yeah, because we have the fucking hole in the roof.
No, that's the foyer.
Would you be interested to know, Trace? I saw a couple of reviews refer to this as an oculus.
Oh, okay.
Weird, eh?
Yeah, that's... Wait, I'm sorry. Like, because it's not a mirror. I just think of oculus as a mirror, but is there another definition for oculus?
Well, oculus actually means like oval.
Oh.
Not mirror.
Oh, I'm just thinking the movie then.
Yes.
All right. Ignore that.
Bye.
We should also acknowledge that Alan is still a character who shows up occasionally in this movie, and meanwhile he has been doing some deduction alongside what's this character's name? We've got William Ferguson, the lawyer, played by Bruce Gray, who basically says, hey, isn't it weird that she's basically selling off the entire house? And also
wait, I'm sorry, but to make a joke, the dog is more of a character in this movie than Mr. Charlie Hunan.
Yeah, but like Charlie Hunnam, I mean, this movie's so white that they end up making like the Dick Halloran character. Like that's what he ends up doing. He's like, I need
Yeah.
a carriage. They're like, no, all the carriages are snowed in. He's like, I need a horse. They're
Oh
like,
my
no more horse. He's like,
God.
I'm gonna walk.
Really?
He is the Dick Halloran character.
Never thought
Remove
of it.
the romance aspect and he's a much better character.
Right?
Yeah. Scatman.
I mean, I will say, I'm actually very surprised that this movie doesn't end with a marriage. I would have thought that it would end with the two of them getting married. I guess technically they're kind of like crossing the threshold at the end together, but
we don't see him again after Edith runs up to the snow. We never see him again, right?
Oh no, she definitely picks him up and they walk together to the gate.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cut that out. Well, yeah, but they don't get married, so yay.
But yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's the other weak aspect is the, that romance, mystery and romance. Wow.
I'm sorry. As much as we were saying the mystery and romance in this Gothic romance isn't working for us, I still really enjoy this movie.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Love it. No, that's what I'm saying. It's a 5-star movie for me still. I don't know.
So, okay, let's talk about some of the good stuff. The siblings conspire to get her to sign this inheritance, but they have to go to the depot in town. And at this point, Edith has begun coughing up blood. She's not feeling super well. She's going a little stir crazy. So she and Thomas go on what effectively could be construed as a honeymoon weekend, right? So they go, they pick up some supplies for his stupid MacGuffin machine, and she gets letters that will eventually reveal, hey, there's people looking for these women in other countries, but also storm's coming in, so we got to go to Pound Town.
I just love too before all it's like Edith's like, how are you? Lucy's like, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm a little sick. Oh, that's great. Have some tea. Yeah, I know. Have some tea.
Literally, like, girl, you've been sleepwalking. No, you can't go anywhere. Also, have some more tea.
Have some more tea. Fucking drink the tea.
And when you don't drink the tea, I'm going to put it in the porridge.
Oh, the subtitle. I put the poison in the porridge. That should be the name of this movie. Poison in the porridge.
I think that's a chapter heading.
Yeah, there you go.
I like Pound Town better.
Pound Town. Okay.
I mean, we get some Hiddleston butt, so...
Oh, also, yes, speaking of Edith for being a little virgin, just rides the dick. She just straddles him and it's like, all right, I'm ready to go.
She's subverting the sex.
Yeah. That's the subversion.
She's secretly a huge slut. She's just been banging everybody back.
Well, because whenever Lucille shows her the Kama Sutra on the edge of the book, and she's like, well, this can't be a huge surprise to you. You've been deep dicked already. Well, no, actually not yet.
Oh, I do love that moment because you know that Lucille knows because she's been watching them through all the fucking keyholes in this house. But she's like, I guess you have not consummated the marriage.
I am a sucker for someone spying through a keyhole. I love that shit. Holding a candelabra.
Tabitha, do we have a candelabra? I need to see the fucking through the keyhole.
What's behind the candelabra? Liberace.
Yeah. Edith is more of a Jennifer Check than a needy.
Very. Oh yeah.
Slut.
She knows about the dick. She knows how to work it.
Oh boy. Okay, so yes, the married couple come back. We get this big confrontation with eggs in the kitchen. It's very exciting.
Man, Lucille is not hiding anything, much like the movie, very well. The way she slams this pot of eggs, it's so good. She's like, I'm not jealous that you're fucking my brother.
Yeah, no, those are not good looking eggs.
Well, they were burned.
Well, okay, so I meant to ask you, are we to infer that they were abused by their mother as children? Because there is a scene early when we first meet Lucille after she's finished playing the piano at the ball. We see a close-up of her pulling her sleeve up over her hand as if to cover, like, scars.
I would say yes to that statement.
Okay.
Either that, or they're trying to make her seem so unhinged. She's like done self-harm kind of
Oh,
thing,
that
which
could be
is
too.
I would, if it was self-harm, I would read that as a direct result of the, I would say, even emotional abuse that she endured. Because she says later in the film, you have no idea how many lashings I took because she was protecting her brother from her mother's abuse.
Oh.
And we also don't know what happened to her in the institution where she was sent at age 14 after killing her mother.
Age 14 after killing mother in like the early 1900s. And she's a woman.
With a cleaver.
Yeah.
Okay, so Edith grabs the keys. She finds the Enola suitcase. She grabs the gramophone piece. She listens. Oh my god, the poison is in the tea. She tries to make a run for it. Shit, I'm still in England in the middle of winter, giant storm. So she just kind of lays down on the stairs and she wakes up. And yeah, this is where we learn a little bit more about how Lucille took care of mom. She's there to make her feel better. I do love that we get this Get Out moment. I mean, obviously, this is before Get Out, but Lucille with the spoon just scraping the edge of the teacup.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, Jordan Peele, you owe Guillermo some dividends there. Okay. We're fully having the siblings now have conversations like, okay, so now we got a killer. We need the money. You need to kill her. Like, we're not trying to hide what's going on at all. And this is where we go to the attic and Edith sees the fucking. It's important to notice that from this point on, Lucille doesn't wear restrictive clothing anymore because basically she's been unmasked. So she's wearing this kind of off the shoulder flowy gown because she's like uninhibited and fully mad.
I want this gown right now. I want to walk outside into the Colorado wind and just like angel arms up and just let it blow. This is the most gorgeous thing. And it's even better when it's stained with blood.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I want to see you in this.
Oh my god. I need to get one at her. Oh, her hair is still up though, isn't it?
At this point, no. Now it's down.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was like, yeah, her hair needs to be down out of that tight ass bun that she killed the dad in.
Well, it can't be up because she just got fucked. So,
oh, yeah.
As we know,
I don't think they.
If you let your hair down, that basically means like, oh, you become uninhibited, and or deranged, or you got deep dicked.
Okay, but she's been fucked before because she had a wrong turn baby that they had to kill.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh, Wrong Turn. What a reference.
Incest baby. You know what, Greg? If you watched Wrong Turn 6, you would know.
You mean 5, 6?
And no, you can skip 5. But actually, 6 has a lot in common because that is a big incest movie. So
it's a big incest movie.
There you go.
Tell you what, when we cover 6, we'll have you come back.
We will cover 6 at some point. It'll happen.
Okay, so at this point, this is where, all the cards are on the table. Everybody knows what's going on, so Lucille does not have to pretend anymore. So she immediately grabs that fucking ring off of her finger and pushes Edith over this banister 2 stories down.
So, okay, my question is this. I know that Charlie Hunnam comes in, but they let him, like, sedate her, fix her leg. Why don't they just kill him?
I feel like it's because they needed her to still sign the document.
Oh,
so they needed her fixed up. And then as soon as he patched up the leg, now we're good to kill him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He knew something was up from the get-go, but he went in there so unprepared. He turned his back on. And that's what I kind of love about it, though, is that he turns his back on Lucille.
He's so shit at
almost
this.
as if she's not a threat. Yeah. And it's like, dude, no, she's in control. Just look at her. Her fucking hair's down.
I do love how malicious this stab wound is, though. Like, she gets him right in the armpit to try to get right to the heart. It is brutal.
He has a medical degree, right? And he pulls it out.
I know. I was like, or leave it in there until you have help.
Yeah, but at least he knows where to tell Thomas to stab him later. So he's like, all right, I guess I'll survive this wound again.
Yeah, fake stab me here so I don't die.
Yeah.
Never mind the other stab wound I also have.
I will say that, I mean, like, walking into this movie, not realizing that it was going to be Jessica Chastain's movie, this is Jessica Chastain's third act. Like,
oh my God.
Everything she's doing in this whole thing is wonderful. Because I love the cold icing. Again, like that Miss Danvers, Miss Havisham, where it's, like she's putting up an air, but she's still an icy cold bitch. But once that mask comes off, man, it is, love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Oh, yeah.
I love like the wail that she has that you could hear like off in the quarter. Like it sounds like almost like the wind, you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I will say this is the point of the film. I said earlier, I don't really buy the love story all that much. This is the point where Thomas's redemption arc begins. And I really wish that the film didn't do this. I know we have to, because we have to believe that he truly does believe Edith. But this idea that, yeah, okay, I'm not going to kill Alan because I'm not a murderer. Fine, whatever. But this idea that now he's going to go back against Lucille, he's had a change of heart because this is the woman that he actually loves. The other three can go fuck themselves, apparently.
I don't know what...
Why is this one different?
Yes. Well, not even why is this one different, because again, like, we're supposed to believe that from the get-go he has fallen for her, but why now? Why now in this particular moment is he like, you know what, I'm gonna start helping her? And I'm really sorry, because I just saw this in my notes, and it was right before she pushes her off that railing. That dialogue exchange was like, I knew it, you're not his sister. And she's like, that's delightful, I am. And just pushes her off. So good.
I mean, I don't understand why at this point he decides to help her, but I get the sense that in all the other faux marriages, he's not the one that does the killing. So when he actually has to do it, he's sort of like, you know, show me a spot in which I won't kill you, because I guess that's like too much for his conscience.
Oh, yeah.
So I took it, I guess.
Maybe it's him seeing her push her off the railing. Like it's an actual act of violence as opposed to poison, which, as we've discussed, Joe, is a quote-unquote woman's weapon.
Right.
But we actually see Lucille commit an act of violence by pushing her off this railing. And so he's like, ooh, it just got real. Even though I've literally had 3 wives die.
Question for you two. Do you think he fucked the other wives? And maybe that's what is different about this?
Maybe that's what's different. I don't know. I just find it weird to believe that they wouldn't have fucked. But maybe would have found an excuse to not.
I mean, it seemed to take a lot longer to get the paperwork and to get Edith to sign it, right? Like it had to take 2 parts. I wonder if all the other heiresses, it was just like, oh yeah, we got a correspondence, and now you did.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that they probably didn't fuck, because I think that, I mean, I'm even surprised that Edith and Thomas fucked, because she's already been poisoned. She doesn't really feel that well, but like, damn, does she fucking hop the D. And all the other women are sort of made to be a bit, I don't know, they seem older, I guess.
Well, but they only fucked because they were out of the house. She had the energy to fuck him because they were out of the house, and that house was oppressive to her, whereas I don't think any of those other women ever got out of that house.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I love sort of about the comparison to The Haunting, is that like I view the house as like this living, breathing thing that's sort of like gesticulating. Yeah. It has like the blood, the clay in the basement that's like, you know, it has a body in it. It's making these sounds that sound very like wailing. And I don't know. Like, I love the house as its own like entity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how it contributes to both Edith's mental health and presumably Lucille's insanity.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. We know that none of these women fuck Thomas, because literally the only F-bomb we get in this movie is Lucille going, what about Enola? You killed her baby. I did not. None of them ever fucked Thomas. It was mine. Because it's her. It was the incest baby, the wrong turn baby.
Yeah.
Right. But also, so wait, Lucille hid a pregnancy for 9 months?
Well, so no, she didn't hide it, because literally, did you watch the end of the movie? I'll throw that right back at you. She says, Enola told me, because we should have killed the baby when it was born, because it wasn't right. Enola told me she could fix it, and she lied. And that's when she killed Enola. Because Enola was, I guess, a nurse?
I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of E's. Edith, Enola, what were the other 2 names?
Pamela was one of them, but Enola's the only important one because of the letter, because we think it's for Edith, the Edith Sharp, E Sharp.
Right.
Mm. Mm.
Definitely one of those Gothic romance kind of conventions. Like, they just happen to have the same initial, and therefore we can confuse the women when we write to them.
I'm actually really surprised there's not something with a piano key on E sharp. Like being a really important part of some fucking secret passage or something, where it's like, play E sharp and the door opens.
God.
Well, maybe that's like part of, the song that Lucille's playing.
Maybe.
I'll have to do some investigating.
All right, so we're near the end here. So Lucille is laying all of her cards on the table. She explains, she has this monstrous love for her brother. Edith is basically incapacitated at this point because of her leg. So it's like, cool. All you can do is fight back using the weapons you got, which includes that pen that Dad gave you. So stab her right in the tit.
This is glorious. This like not just right through that tit heart, like just right there, and she is bleeding out of her chest. It is great.
Yeah, so at this point, that's when Edith makes a run for it. Thomas helps her out, and then we get this brother-sister battle, and Lucille stabs him a bunch of times, including in the face.
This, I don't think I've seen anything like this before.
Even him like slowly pulling it out.
Well, and the blood fills his eye. You're like, ooh, girl,
I love that part.
That blade went into your brain, and you were gonna die. Like,
oh, sure.
Ooh, boy, yeah.
I do love that we don't try to pretend that he's gonna be okay, or even that he has like a bunch more time left. He basically dies right here. Which means that Lucille is now completely off the charts deranged because she has just realized she killed the love of her life. So yes, we get the elevator, and then we get the staircase, and then we get a bit more elevator.
Wait, y'all, what if the romance in the Gothic romance isn't Thomas and Edith? What if it's Thomas and Lucille?
Interesting.
I mean, that makes more sense.
I mean, like, because to me, the tragedy is when she kills Thomas. Like, as horrible as she is, that look on her face is true despair. So I don't know. Maybe that's maybe that's also the subversion, right? Where it's like, oh, it's not the romance you think; it's the other romance. But then you don't really empathize with her, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you do with a domineering mother who is abusive. I think she's like a byproduct of abuse. But yeah, I think like the shock in Thomas's face when he gets stabbed, almost like he just did that. Like there's something very like tragic and sort of startling about that. So I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. It's again the kind of thing where Chastain is so good in this role, and it's really fun to watch her go off in these final moments, right? When she becomes the villainess of this film. It's super fun. She is so out of control. Like, I love the entire showdown out on the actual crimson soil. Both women are covered in blood at this point. We've got the pounding machine in the background and everything. It's all very exciting.
Before we even get out there, when they're facing off in the room with the clay pots, they're like on opposite sides of the room, and there's a part where she just hisses at her. She goes, I'm like, yeah, do it.
Get her.
That's funny. I had seen a couple of people say, oh, this film's campy. And I don't agree with that. But I do think that Chastain's role here, like the way that she's delivering some of these lines, just the sheer antics of it, it does feel like, oh, okay, it looks like she could bite a piece of the set off.
I don't want to say hysterics, because I feel like that's a wrong word to use when we're talking about women. But just the hysterical nature of her performance. I guess I could see how someone would read this as camp, but it never feels, to me, camp is like above and beyond. It's like this heightened reality, like you are going outside of the realms of normal reactions to things. Right. I never find Lucille's reactions to be outside the realms of reality. I find all this very believable because she's unhinged. But I wouldn't disagree with someone saying, oh, it's camp, but I don't think it's camp.
I don't think it's camp, no.
I mean, I think the scene where she slams the cast iron down and the eggs sort of bloop, it's a little bit
more campy, for sure.
Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, the food looks disgusting. It's just a sudden burst. I don't know. I don't agree that it's camp, but I don't know, few things achieve that nowadays.
Yeah.
I will say one of my favorite moments in this kind of multifaceted climax is when she just grabs Edith's knife.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So she refuses to let go, and of course Edith pulls back. So she basically just like slices off part of her own hand. Like she slices her own palm.
No, yeah, no. It's sorry. I know I like pulled you back into the clay basin, but we're back up here. But like all the shots where we have Edith like looking around, like wandering the fog and be like whatever. But we have these shots of Lucille like running behind her, but she's almost like gliding through the fog like a ghost
or a vampire.
It is so awesome. This looks fantastic. and yes, that her pulling on that knife. Ooh.
Yeah, she sort of glides around like one of Dracula's brides.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was giving me a little 30 Days a Night.
Yeah, that too. I mean, but what I love about like the scene where she grabs the knife is that like it's just sort of her putting on display like her past of being abused, and the sort of the pain of it is just non-existent. But yeah, I love that final confrontation.
But then who kind of saves the day, but the ghost of Thomas, who's pulling a Chris Kattan from House on Haunted Hill. Luckily, it's just a distraction. Wait, y'all tell me this. If you're in a fight with someone, would you tell them you're going to have to kill me because I am literally not going to stop until I kill you? Because I feel like that means, okay, well, you only got
now
one
I gotta
choice.
Kill you.
Yeah, like they're going to kill you or they're going to do the same thing. I wouldn't tell them that because then they might be like, wait, I can get through to you. No.
But I mean, also, I wouldn't trust someone if they said, oh, look behind you when you're in the middle of a fight to the death.
Oh, but I believe this, though, because she is insane by this point.
Sure.
And she is so desperate to see her brother again. Like, I believe it. And I love that her fate is that she's going to fucking play piano for the rest of her life and never see her brother again.
Right.
Well, I feel like they're both trapped there.
Oh, yeah, no, I do think that.
I don't know. It's just weird because it doesn't show you a final shot of Ghost Thomas. It's just her playing the piano.
Mm-hmm.
But again, which is why I kind of think, is there something having to do with the E sharp key? Like, is that her sort of doting over this lost love of Edith Sharp or even Enola, that's it. So yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
Because the design of all the ghosts, I mean, like, we had the mom with cholera who's all black. Any of the ghosts, the wives, they're all red because they're buried in the clay liquid shit.
Right.
Thomas looks quote unquote normal white pasty ghost with his blood coming out of his cheek. But then Lucille,
blackened.
I guess she's just like a normal ghost, like playing this piano.
Yeah, I mean, she looks sort of like her mother did. Like, well, not red, but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something like deeply darkened about her, but yeah, I don't know. The whole look behind you and she buys it. And yeah, that the Thomas Ghost thing, I just really don't care for. Yeah, I buy it. Why is he out there?
It would have worked better if he wasn't actually there.
Yeah,
right.
Like, still have her say it, but don't have him be there.
Yeah,
like Edith knows that the one thing she could use against Lucille would be the love of her brother. It's the reason why she's done all of this, really. But I think the other thing that bothers me is the sort of brightness of the daytime. Even though the fog is masking some of it, the FX work on Tom Hiddleston here looks super dodgy, and it takes me right out, unfortunately. And it's meant to be this emotional climax, right? Like, oh, this is the thing that's going to save you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But,
yeah.
I mean, I like it in terms of we're using the ghosts against you because the ghosts, in fact, were always trying to tell Edith, hey, we're on your side. We're trying to help you to get out of this. It's not necessarily a subversion. It's pretty classic Gothic romance.
I was going to say, like that's well-worn territory, right? Like the ghosts you think are ghosts. Fucking Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island does it with the zombies.
Oh my God, of course you had to sneak a reference in.
The zombies are good. They're warning you, go away.
It's like in Zombievers, where the beavers are good and they're trying to warn you, get out of the water.
Okay, but that's not factual. Mine was factual. Beware of Zombie Island, Moonscar Island.
Check the fucking music room.
The music room. The music room. Okay, so she writes a book.
Edith grabs Alan. They walk towards the gate, and we see the storm is broken, so all of those dumb people from town have wandered out. The end. It's a book.
Yep. She writes a book. The book is Crimson Peak. Yeah, it's like Sleeping Beauty, but Crimson Peak.
I mean, you could have said Little Women, too, but sure. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Greg, as the guest of honor, final thoughts on Crimson Peak after all the making fun of it we've done for the past 2 hours?
Greg, Tabitha, what did we think of Crimson Peak?
Scariest fucking movie. I think that it does so many things well on like It's funny that cinematography, same Dan Laustin who did League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because it sort of has that look almost, but with a much higher production value, and also whoever's doing, set pieces. But I think it's really great despite the flaws of its core romance. And yeah, I have issues with the mystery of it. I think that they should have really just given it more of, like both of you said, Edith's POV for most of it, because we get lost in essentially the fog. But I don't know. I've seen this movie so many times where it's at a point where I'm seeing new things and I'm feeling new things, but it will never take away from how much I love of it as a ghost story. Because I like this, watching it last night, I was like, the scenes with the ghost in the hallway, I actually think it is really creepy. And even Trace, you posted the scene where the ghost is like peering through the doorway, and they're all chilling. And I think that it's done in sparse bits where it's not, it's not overkill. And I don't know. I do really love Edith and Lucille. I can take Thomas. I think really he's, aside from Charlie Hunnam, I think he's the weaker link. But I think Chastain's like, she's doing a lot of work, and I think it's like pulling off, because I think that in her prior roles she's a badass in Zero Dark 30, and I think she's sort of taking bits of everything that she's done.
Again, I know we've poked so many holes in this film tonight, but all that aside, I was thoroughly entertained by this film from beginning to end. I was never bored, and even if I was questioning some of the decisions being made, I was still very much like, I don't care. Like I think this is a very fun movie. I love all these characters, even Thomas, even fucking Charlie Hunnam. And yeah, I do think that the sparse like scare scenes are very effective. I do wish it was practical effects instead of CGI, but it is what it is. I'm not a big fan of not that I'm not a fan. I just don't read novelizations of horror films very much. And by very much, I mean never. But I would love to read a novelization of this book, but like written like it was written in the 1800s with a good cover, just like that. Like I was reading it for a fucking summer reading list for school. Because I feel like it would read very well. I feel like this would read a lot better than you see it. And I would fix a lot of the issues that I have with it. But big jump up in quality for me on a rewatch still, even like flaws and all.
And put a little porn on the side, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that deep HJ. I mean, the thing that I really love about the editing is when she first takes a sip of the tea, it cuts to her like sort of startled awake in bed, and the color palette of the film just goes to like a green yellow sort of, and it's almost as if she's dreaming, because she starts to roam this sort of creaky vacant mansion. And it's similar to when she was a kid and she first saw the ghost. It was at night, she was laying in bed, so everything sort of takes on this like weird dreamlike state. And yeah, I just love looking at this movie for 2 hours, and it's why it's flaws and all, it just doesn't matter. It's just like a real feast.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm a little bit cooler than the two of you. For me, this is mostly a visual success. So I think the actors are doing really good work. The narrative is a little bit I don't want to say underwhelming. It's just, yeah, some parts of it don't really work all that well for me, but just visually, this is so sumptuous. Like the costume design, the sets, yeah, everything about the way it's shot. I think it's just such an evocative world. You really, really do get lost in it. And the whole concept of, the bloody grounds that just become more bloody and the house that's sinking into it, it's so good. So, yeah, I mean, you watch it, you're never bored because there's always something interesting to look at, even if you don't love the mysteries, you don't love the romance and so on. But then, you got that Jessica Chastain third act to look forward to, and it is fucking great. Like, this movie goes out with a bang. So, yeah, I really enjoyed rewatching this.
There you go. All right, well, that is Crimson Peak, everyone. And before we announce what we're covering next week, Greg, let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter for the time being, as Real Brew, on Instagram with the same handle. Yeah, I'm trying to make 2023 the year that I actually work on projects that I've had sort of lingering. So the Love and Ooh podcast, where I cover Ubol's filmography, because I have never seen a single movie of his.
What? Okay. Wait. Yeah. I'm going to say, I hadn't either until I think it was the beginning of the pandemic, when I was like, you know what? That can't be that bad. And so I did a day watch of House of the Dead, Alone in the Dark, and Blood Rain. And I'm not going to tell you what I thought about them until you start your podcast.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, I have all of his older films that are like really hard to get. I have those all secured, and those all seem more, I don't want to say the word legit, because it's legit and U-Bowl seem, I don't know, sort of at odds with each other, but I'm excited to get to like the Rampage and the House of the Dead. But I think after a while I will highly regret it. But U-Bowl is following that podcast account on Twitter, so now I feel like I have to do it.
If not, he'll just fight you. He'll box you like he does all of his other critics.
That's true.
He is unabashedly proud of himself. I will give him that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers, or shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we have covered. Go to our YouTube channel to check out our interviews with various horror filmmakers, as well as our monthly hangouts where we talk about hot button issues with some of our peers. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook HorrorQueers group. If you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Or if you'd like to support us with money, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We're still in January, so we've got episodes on Scare Package 2, Rad Chad's Revenge, The Pale Blue Eye, Skinamarink, and Megan, and an audio commentary on Cloverfield for its 15th anniversary. A lot of stuff. And a very exciting February coming up, too. But Joe. What are we covering next week?
Nothing glib to say about this one, because this is another one that you and I have been really looking forward to revisiting. It's also a very popular request. We've been meaning to do this for a couple of years. We just bump it because there's other things. And now the time has come to pay a return trip. Actually, we're into Dark Castle territory, are we not, Trace?
Yeah, we are.
So we're going to take a look at the House of Wax remake.
I have loved this movie ever since I saw it twice in theaters in 2005, but I am so happy to see the resurgence of popularity. People come back and like, oh my god, that's actually a good movie. Like, no shit.
And a mean fucking movie.
It's a mean movie! It is a full 2 hours now, so be on the lookout for that.
Yes. Okay.
But, okay, everyone. So yes, House of Wax goodies next week. But until then, we can cross out Crimson Peak.
Indeed. And cross out Horror Queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.